"You're wasting everyone's time with these unfounded theories." Professor Harrington's voice cut through the lecture hall as he dismissed Amara's ideas. Everyone expected the 12-year-old girl from Dorchester to back down. How dare she challenge Harvard's most renowned mathematician? But when Amara quietly raised her hand during the final presentation and said, "I'd like to present my solution to the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture," no one imagined what would happen next. What makes a child from a struggling neighborhood believe she can solve a problem that confounded the world's greatest minds for decades? Don't miss this incredible journey of brilliance, prejudice, and vindication that's changing lives across America. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Amara Johnson's nimble fingers traced equations across the worn paper, her dark eyes intense with concentration. At 12 years old, she possessed a gift that remained largely hidden within the walls of her modest Boston apartment. Numbers spoke to her in ways people never did, clear, logical, and beautiful in their patterns. "Daddy, look," she exclaimed, holding up her notebook where she'd solved a complex algebra problem. The method wasn't what her teacher had taught, it was entirely her own. Marcus Johnson looked up from his bus driver's uniform he was ironing for tomorrow's early shift. Exhaustion lined his face, but pride sparkled in his eyes. "That's my girl. Always finding your own path." Since Amara's mother had passed away 3 years ago, Marcus had worked tirelessly, driving buses by day and doing maintenance work by night, to keep their small world turning. What little spare money he had went toward second-hand math books that Amara devoured like other kids consumed candy. "Ms. Williams said I might be ready for high school math," Amara said, her voice both excited and hesitant. But Principal Davis told her that would be disrupting the natural order of the curriculum. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Some people can't see beyond what they expect to see, baby girl. But you keep showing them. The right people will notice." The next day at Roosevelt Middle School, Amara sat silent in the back of the classroom while Ms. Williams, the only black teacher in the school, reviewed fractions that Amara had mastered years ago. Unlike the other teachers who seemed irritated by Amara's advanced abilities, Ms. Williams recognized something special. After class, Ms. Williams called Amara to her desk. "I have something for you." She slid over a dog-eared college textbook on number theory. "This was mine in university. I think you're ready for it." Amara's fingers trembled as she opened the book, immediately lost in the elegant equations. "Amara," Ms. Williams said gently, "I believe you could be one of the great mathematical minds of your generation. But this world doesn't always make space for brilliant black girls." Her warm brown eyes held Amara's. "You'll have to claim that space for yourself." That night, by the glow of a desk lamp as her father worked his second job, Amara dove into the textbook. Numbers and patterns swirled through her mind, connecting in ways that felt like uncovering secrets of the universe. In those moments, she wasn't just a girl from a struggling neighborhood whom most teachers overlooked. She was a mathematician. One day, she whispered to herself, fingers tracing a particularly elegant proof, "I'll solve something no one else can. Something everyone else thinks is impossible." She didn't know then how soon that promise would be tested. Ms. Williams practically burst into the classroom, waving a colorful flyer with an excitement Amara had never seen in her normally composed teacher. "Amara. Look at this," she said, placing the flyer on Amara's desk during lunch break. "Harvard University is hosting a special mathematics lecture series for gifted students. They're accepting middle schoolers for the first time ever." Amara's eyes widened as she read the flyer. A 6-week program at Harvard, culminating in a special symposium where students would be mentored by leading mathematicians. Her heart raced, but doubt quickly followed. "Harvard wouldn't want someone like me," she said quietly. "Look at the application fee. And I'd need transportation, and—" "Let me worry about those details," Ms. Williams interrupted. "This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. Someone needs to see what you can do, Amara." Over the next week, Ms. Williams helped Amara prepare her application, including an essay and samples of her mathematical work. Together, they compiled a portfolio that highlighted Amara's unique approaches to solving complex problems. When Ms. Williams approached Principal Davis for a school recommendation, his response was exactly what they had feared. Harvard? He chuckled, adjusting his tie. Be realistic, Denise. This program is for students from Phillips Academy and Boston Latin, not, well. He gestured vaguely toward the hallway where Amara waited. We should encourage practical aspirations. Perhaps a vocational track would be more appropriate. Ms. Williams stood taller. With all due respect, sir, Amara Johnson has the most brilliant mathematical mind I've encountered in 15 years of teaching. I'm submitting this recommendation with or without your signature. 2 weeks later, Amara sat at her kitchen table, staring at an envelope with Harvard's crimson logo. Her father stood behind her, his hand warm on her shoulder. Whatever it says, I'm proud of you, baby girl. With trembling fingers, Amara opened the letter and read it once, twice, 3 times before the words sank in. I got in, she whispered, then louder, Daddy, I got in. Marcus swept her into a hug so tight it lifted her off the ground. Of course you did. They'd be fools not to take my brilliant girl. That night, after her father left for his night shift, Amara searched online for information about Harvard. The images intimidated her: grand buildings with columns, students who looked nothing like her, professors in tweed jackets. She'd never set foot in a place like that. Ms. Williams called to congratulate her. Remember, Amara, you belong there just as much as anyone else. Your mind earned you this spot. But what if they realize I'm not like the other students? Amara asked, voicing her deepest fear. You're not, Ms. Williams replied. You're exceptional. And it's time the world beyond Roosevelt Middle School discovered that fact. As the program's start date approached, practical challenges emerged. Marcus rearranged his work schedule to drive Amara to Harvard for the twice-weekly sessions, despite the cost in gas and lost wages. Ms. Williams helped find an affordable blazer at a second-hand store so Amara would look the part. The night before her first session, Amara couldn't sleep. She paced their small apartment, reciting mathematical principles to calm herself. What if I'm not ready? She asked when her father found her still awake at midnight. Marcus knelt to meet her eyes. Listen to me. Your mother used to say that genius isn't about knowing all the answers, it's about having the courage to find new questions. You've got that courage, Amara. Tomorrow, you just need to be yourself. Amara nodded, clutching the acceptance letter like a talisman against her doubts. Tomorrow, Harvard awaited. The iconic red brick and ivy-covered walls of Harvard University loomed before them as Marcus parked their aging Toyota several blocks away to avoid the expensive campus parking fees. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched her second-hand backpack filled with notebooks and pencils, tools that suddenly seemed inadequate for where she was heading. Remember, Marcus said, straightening the collar of Amara's blazer, your mind belongs anywhere it can grow. Stand tall. She nodded, trying to embody the confidence in his words despite the butterflies in her stomach. They walked together past groups of college students who seemed to move with an easy assurance that Amara couldn't imagine ever possessing. The mathematics building was housed in an imposing structure with massive wooden doors. Inside, polished floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, making Amara feel even smaller. A sign directed them to Lecture Hall B for the Young Mathematician's Exceptional Talent Program. This is where I leave you, baby girl, Marcus said, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Make them remember your name. Amara stepped into the lecture hall and froze. About 20 students were already seated, most accompanied by parents in business attire consulting expensive-looking electronic tablets. The students, predominantly white and Asian, wore what appeared to be private school uniforms or designer casual clothes. A tall woman with a clipboard approached. Name? She asked, her gaze flickering over Amara's appearance with poorly concealed surprise. Amara Johnson, she replied, lifting her chin slightly the way Ms. Williams had practiced with her. The woman checked her list. Ah, yes. The scholarship entry. She emphasized the word in a way that made it clear Amara was an anomaly. "Take a seat anywhere. Professor Harrington will begin shortly." As Amara walked toward the seats, she heard whispers. "Is she lost? Must be some diversity initiative. Probably the janitor's kid." She chose a seat at the edge of the second row, keeping her eyes forward, remembering her father's words. "Stand tall." The whispers ceased abruptly as a man strode into the room. Tall and lean with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. "I am Professor Richard Harrington," he announced without preamble. "I hold the Elliott Chair of Mathematics at Harvard and have received the Fields Medal for my work in topological quantum field theory." His piercing blue eyes surveyed the room. "If you've heard I'm difficult to impress, you've heard correctly." He paced before them like a general inspecting troops. "You've been selected because your schools have identified you as mathematically gifted. That means very little to me. In this program, you'll be measured by one standard alone: your ability to think beyond the constraints of conventional mathematics." Professor Harrington began calling out names, connecting them to prestigious schools: Phillips Exeter, Boston Latin, Commonwealth, Windsor. When he reached Johnson, Amara, he paused, looking up with a frown. "Roosevelt Middle School. I'm not familiar with it." "It's a public school in Dorchester, sir," Amara replied, acutely aware of the attention now focused on her. The single syllable conveyed volumes of skepticism. "An unexpected addition to our cohort." A blonde girl in an expensive-looking sweater leaned over to her friend and whispered something that made them both giggle. Amara felt her cheeks burn but kept her expression neutral. Professor Harrington launched into a lecture on the fundamentals of mathematical proof, occasionally calling on students to respond to his questions. Despite raising her hand several times, Amara was never acknowledged. When she finally spoke up to offer a solution to a problem he'd posed about prime numbers, the professor's response was cutting. "An interesting attempt, Miss Johnson, but perhaps you should focus on understanding the basics before offering unorthodox approaches." The truth was, her solution had been elegant, more direct than the one he eventually endorsed from a boy named Connor from Phillips Exeter. As the 3-hour session continued, Amara noticed a pattern. The professor lavished attention on students from certain backgrounds while treating others, particularly her, as afterthoughts. During the break, no one sat with her or introduced themselves. She was invisible except when serving as an example of incorrect thinking. Near the end of the session, Professor Harrington made an announcement that sent a ripple of excitement through the room. "Throughout this program, we'll be exploring contemporary mathematical challenges. To cultivate your ambition, I'll introduce you to the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture, an unsolved problem that has confounded the world's leading mathematicians for decades." His eyes gleamed with the zealotry of a true mathematician. "Even I have only made modest progress toward a solution. It represents the beautiful impossibility that drives our field forward." For the first time that day, Amara felt a spark of genuine excitement. An impossible problem. Wasn't that exactly what she'd promised herself she would one day solve? As she left the building to meet her waiting father, Amara's emotions were a complex equation: humiliation, anger, determination, and beneath it all, an irrepressible curiosity about this supposedly impossible conjecture. "How was it?" Marcus asked as she climbed into the car. Amara considered lying to spare him worry, but they'd always been honest with each other. "They don't think I belong there, Daddy." "And what do you think?" She thought about the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture, a problem that had defeated even Professor Harrington. "I think they don't know me yet," she said with quiet determination. "But they will." The second session of the Harvard program brought the moment Amara had been waiting for. Professor Harrington stood before an enormous whiteboard covered in elegant mathematical notation. "The Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture," he announced with reverence, "represents one of the most beautiful unresolved questions in mathematics." His hand swept across the equations. "In essence, it proposes a relationship between prime numbers and quantum states that, if proven, would revolutionize both pure mathematics and theoretical physics." Amara leaned forward, absorbing every symbol. Despite the professor's dismissive attitude toward her, mathematics itself spoke a language she understood intuitively. As he walked through the problem's history, she began to see patterns and possibilities the others seemed to miss. "Sir," she ventured during a pause, "couldn't we approach this by examining the divergence patterns rather than convergence?" The lecture hall fell silent. Professor Harrington turned slowly, his expression a mixture of irritation and surprise. "Miss Johnson," he said with exaggerated patience, "this conjecture has been attacked by Fields medalists and Nobel laureates using approaches far more sophisticated than what you're suggesting. Perhaps save your questions until you've mastered undergraduate mathematics." Laughter rippled through the room. The girl beside Amara, Victoria Whitmore from Windsor School, smirked and whispered, "Did you really think you could solve something Harvard professors can't?" Amara fell silent, but her mind continued racing, undeterred by the humiliation. As Professor Harrington continued, she filled her notebook with ideas, drawing connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. There was something about the structure of the conjecture that resonated with her unique way of seeing numbers. Later, when the students were divided into small groups to work on simpler problems, Amara found herself isolated. The teaching assistant, Michael Chen, eventually sat with her, but his attention was superficial. "Don't take it personally," he advised while checking his watch. "Harrington enjoys tearing down students. It's a rite of passage." "But he doesn't even listen to my approaches," Amara said. Michael shrugged. "Look, I'll be honest. You're not what they expected when they accepted your application. Some faculty were concerned about maintaining the program standards." The word stung, but Amara refused to show it. "The math doesn't care who solves it," she replied quietly. On the ride home, Marcus noticed her subdued mood. "Tough day. They showed us this famous unsolved problem. The professor said it's impossible." She described the conjecture in terms her father wouldn't fully understand but would appreciate for her enthusiasm. Marcus listened thoughtfully. "You know, when I was about your age, my teacher said it was impossible for someone from our neighborhood to ever become a pilot. That's all I'd dreamed of." He paused. "I believed him and gave up that dream." "Is that why you drive buses instead?" Amara asked softly. "Maybe. But here's what I learned too late: when people tell you something's impossible, sometimes they're just saying it's impossible for them." He glanced at her. "Don't let someone else's limitations become yours." That night, Amara covered her bedroom walls with papers, reconstructing the Hamilton-Watanabe conjecture from memory. She worked until her fingers were stained with graphite and her eyes burned with fatigue. Just before dawn, she saw something, a pattern within the chaos, a potential pathway that Professor Harrington had overlooked. It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was a beginning. "Impossible," she whispered to herself with a small smile. "We'll see about that." Rain drummed against the windows of their small apartment as Amara sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by papers covered in equations. 3 weeks into the Harvard program, she had converted her bedroom into what her father jokingly called the math laboratory. "Dinner's ready," Marcus called, knocking gently on her door. "Just 5 more minutes," Amara replied, not looking up from her work. Marcus pushed the door open, carrying a plate of spaghetti. "You said that an hour ago, baby girl. Even brilliant mathematicians need to eat." She reluctantly set aside her notebook and accepted the food. "Thanks, Daddy." "How's the impossible problem coming along?" he asked, sitting on the edge of her bed and carefully avoiding disturbing her organized chaos of papers. "I think I found a different approach," she said between bites. "Everyone tries to solve it using traditional methods, but what if the solution requires something completely new?" Her eyes brightened with the excitement of discovery. "The professor keeps looking for convergence in the conventional sense, but I'm exploring a different definition of limits within quantum spaces." Marcus laughed softly. "I have no idea what you just said, but I love watching you figure it out." Amara's expression grew serious. "Ms. Williams called today. She asked how the program is going." "And what did you tell her?" "I said it was fine. Amara pushed her spaghetti around the plate. I didn't tell her that Professor Harrington barely acknowledges me, or that most of the other students act like I'm invisible. Marcus's jaw tightened. Maybe I should have a word with this professor. No. Amara said quickly. That would only make things worse. She set down her fork. Remember when I was 9, and my math teacher, Mrs. Brennan, said I was cheating because no child could solve those equations that quickly? Marcus nodded, the memory clearly still painful. You came to school ready to fight for me, but it didn't change her mind. It just made her treat me differently, like I was a problem. Amara looked directly at her father. I need to solve this myself. With the math. The next morning, Mrs. Diaz from next door drove Amara to Harvard since Marcus had an early shift. As they approached the mathematics building, Amara noticed a group of students from the program huddled together, including Victoria Whitmore and Connor Phillips. Look who it is, Victoria called out as Amara approached. The charity case who thinks she can solve the impossible problem. Connor at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Leave her alone, Victoria. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Victoria replied with a shrug. It's embarrassing watching her raise her hand with those ridiculous ideas. Amara walked past them, clutching her notebooks tighter. Their words hurt, but as she entered the building, she remembered something her mother used to say before she passed: your brilliance isn't diminished by someone else's inability to see it. Today, Professor Harrington had invited a guest lecturer, Dr. James Morgan from MIT, to discuss approaches to the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture. Unlike Harrington, Dr. Morgan seemed genuinely interested in the students' perspectives, encouraging questions throughout his presentation. When he asked for alternative viewpoints, Amara cautiously raised her hand. Yes, miss. Dr. Morgan said, pointing to her. Amara Johnson, sir. I was wondering if we might consider applying non-standard analysis to reframe the quantum aspects of the conjecture. A moment of silence followed before Dr. Morgan broke into a wide smile. That's remarkably insightful. Can you elaborate? As Amara explained her thinking, she noticed Professor Harrington's expression darkening. When she finished, Dr. Morgan nodded appreciatively. Very creative approach, Miss Johnson. Unconventional, but mathematics advances through such fresh perspectives. The validation from a respected mathematician sent a current of confidence through Amara. Perhaps her ideas weren't as far-fetched as Professor Harrington had implied. After class, as students filed out, Amara overheard Professor Harrington speaking tersely to Dr. Morgan. Encouraging undeveloped theories does these students no favors, James. Especially those who lack the proper mathematical foundation. That young lady's insight was quite sophisticated, Richard. Perhaps you should. I know my students' capabilities, Harrington interrupted. Some are here due to institutional pressures for diversity. Amara slipped away before they noticed her, the professor's words ringing in her ears. That night, working by lamplight while rain continued to pour outside, she made a breakthrough in her approach to the conjecture. This could work, she whispered to herself. This could actually work. The Harvard program had reached its halfway point, and the atmosphere in Lecture Hall B had grown increasingly tense. Professor Harrington had divided the students into research teams to explore different aspects of the Hamilton-Watanabe conjecture. Predictably, Amara found herself isolated until a quiet boy named Samuel Kim reluctantly joined her group after arriving late. Sorry, he mumbled, sliding into the seat beside her. Guess we're the leftovers. Amara had noticed Samuel before. He attended Boston Latin School and usually sat alone, his nose buried in advanced physics textbooks. Unlike the other students, he had never participated in the subtle mockery directed at Amara. I've been exploring a non-traditional approach, Amara said cautiously, sliding her notebook toward him. It's based on redefining the relationship between prime number distributions and quantum states. Samuel scanned her work, his eyebrows rising incrementally as he turned each page. This is, actually interesting. You're using hypercomplex numbers to model the quantum interactions. For the first time since the program began, Amara felt the thrill of mathematical dialogue with a peer who wasn't dismissing her ideas outright. They spent the next hour deep in discussion, sketching equations and challenging each other's assumptions. Their collaboration didn't go unnoticed. Victoria Whitmore and her research partner, Connor Phillips, watched from across the room with undisguised disdain. "Looks like the diversity quota finally found a friend," Victoria remarked loudly enough for others to hear. "Maybe they can solve the impossible problem with the power of inclusion." Connor laughed awkwardly, though his eyes betrayed discomfort with Victoria's cruelty. Professor Harrington moved from group to group, spending considerable time with the students from elite backgrounds while giving only cursory glances to others. When he finally reached Amara and Samuel, his assessment was predictably dismissive. "Interesting attempt," he said after a brief look at their work, "but you're venturing into mathematical fantasy rather than rigorous proof. Perhaps focus on more achievable problems." As he walked away, Samuel whispered, "He didn't even read what we wrote." "He never does," Amara replied quietly. The session continued with Professor Harrington asking each group to present their progress. Victoria and Connor showcased an elegant but conventional approach that received effusive praise. When it was Amara and Samuel's turn, their presentation met with skeptical silence from the professor. "Miss Johnson," Professor Harrington interrupted midway through their explanation, "what you're proposing violates foundational principles of quantum mathematics. This is precisely why students should master basics before attempting creative flights of fancy." "But sir," Amara persisted, "if we reconsider the definition of quantum states using the framework I've outlined." "Enough," he cut her off sharply. "This program aims to build serious mathematicians, not encourage undisciplined speculation. You're wasting everyone's time with these unfounded theories." The room fell silent. Several students looked uncomfortably at their desks, while Victoria smirked openly. "Actually, Professor," Samuel spoke up unexpectedly, "I think Amara's approach has merit. The traditional frameworks haven't yielded solutions in 40 years, so perhaps—" "Mr. Kim," Professor Harrington interrupted coldly, "I expected better judgment from a Boston Latin student. Let's move on to projects with actual mathematical validity." Humiliation burned through Amara. After class, she found herself in the building's restroom, fighting back tears of frustration. She wasn't crying because of the professor's cruelty, she was crying because she knew her approach was valid, and no one with the power to validate it would even consider it. The door swung open and Victoria entered with two friends, faltering momentarily upon seeing Amara. "Oh look, it's the next Fields medalist," Victoria mocked. "Having a little cry because the professor hurt your feelings?" Amara gathered her papers, trying to leave, but Victoria blocked her path. "You know you don't belong here, right? My father is on Harvard's board of trustees, and he says this program used to be exclusive to students with actual mathematical potential." "Please move," Amara said quietly. "Harvard isn't for everyone," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "There's no shame in admitting you're out of your depth." "Well, maybe a little shame." Samuel was waiting outside when Amara finally emerged. "I heard them," he said. "Victoria's been terrible to everyone who isn't from her social circle, but she's especially vicious to you." "It doesn't matter," Amara replied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "The math is what matters." "Are you going to drop out?" Samuel asked. "No one would blame you." Amara thought about her father working double shifts to drive her to these sessions, about Ms. Williams who had fought for her opportunity, about the equations that still danced in her mind, offering pathways no one else seemed willing to explore. "No," she said with sudden certainty. "This is exactly where I need to be." Later that evening, as Marcus drove them home, Amara stared out the window at the darkening Boston skyline. "You're quiet tonight," her father observed. "Daddy," she said slowly, "how do you prove you belong somewhere when everyone's already decided you don't?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. "You remember the story of your grandmother? How she became the first black surgical nurse at Boston General?" Amara nodded. "It was family legend. They put her through hell, questioning her every decision, watching for any mistake. She told me once that she survived by remembering what she was there for, not their approval, but the work itself. He glanced at his daughter. You're there for the mathematics, Amara. Let that be your anchor. That night, Amara pinned a new sheet of paper to her bedroom wall. At the top, she wrote, "The Impossible Problem," and beneath it, "Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture Solution by Amara Johnson." It was no longer just about proving herself in the program. It was about the pure, perfect truth that existed within the mathematics, a truth that cared nothing for the prejudices of professors or the cruelty of classmates. "I'll solve it," she whispered to herself. Not to prove them wrong, but because it's there, waiting to be solved. 3 days later, Amara arrived early to the mathematics building, hoping to review her latest work in the quiet lecture hall before others arrived. To her surprise, the lights were already on, and a woman stood at the whiteboard, studying the equations Professor Harrington had left from the previous session. The woman turned as Amara entered, tall and poised with close-cropped natural hair streaked with silver, wearing a crimson blazer over a simple black dress. Her keen eyes settled on Amara with immediate interest. "You must be Amara Johnson," she said in a warm, authoritative voice. "I've heard about you." Amara tensed, wondering what exactly the woman had heard. "Yes, ma'am. Are you one of the program coordinators?" The woman smiled, extending her hand. "Dr. Elaine Carter. I'm a professor in the mathematics department, specializing in quantum topology and number theory." Amara's eyes widened in recognition. "You wrote Reimagining Prime Distributions in Quantum Fields. I found your paper online and read it 3 times. Your work on non-standard analysis was revolutionary." Dr. Carter's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "That paper is graduate-level mathematics, yet you understood it well enough to reference it." "It helped me think differently about the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture," Amara admitted, pulling out her notebook. "Your approach to quantum spaces gave me ideas about reframing the problem." Dr. Carter examined Amara's notes with growing interest. "This is remarkably creative thinking," she said finally. "Unorthodox, certainly, but mathematics has often advanced through such unconventional pathways." She looked directly at Amara. "Tell me, has Professor Harrington provided feedback on your approach?" Amara hesitated, unwilling to complain but unable to lie. "He believes I should focus on mastering fundamentals before attempting creative theories." Something flickered in Dr. Carter's expression, recognition, perhaps even anger, quickly controlled. "I see. And yet you've continued pursuing this line of inquiry?" "The mathematics makes sense to me," Amara said simply. Dr. Carter nodded, a decision crystallizing in her eyes. "I'd like to hear more about your work, Amara. Could you meet me in my office tomorrow after your session? Room 302 in the Maxwell Building." Before Amara could respond, other students began filtering into the lecture hall, including Victoria, who narrowed her eyes at the sight of Amara speaking with a Harvard professor. Dr. Carter noticed the look. "Don't let anyone diminish your light, Miss Johnson," she said quietly before departing with a nod to Professor Harrington, who had just entered. The session proceeded as usual, with Professor Harrington lavishing attention on certain students while barely acknowledging others. However, Amara noticed him glancing at her several times with an unreadable expression. When class ended, Samuel caught up with her outside. "Who was that professor you were talking to earlier?" "Dr. Elaine Carter," Amara replied. "She specializes in quantum topology." Samuel whistled low. "She's brilliant. I read about her breaking barriers in mathematics, first black woman to receive tenure in Harvard's mathematics department. They say she turned down the field's medal committee because they overlooked female mathematicians for decades." The next day, Amara knocked tentatively on Dr. Carter's office door. The space inside was warm and inviting, walls lined with bookshelves and mathematical models. Unlike Professor Harrington's sterile workspace, Dr. Carter's office felt alive with intellectual curiosity. "Come in, Amara," Dr. Carter said, clearing space on a table covered with papers. "I've been reviewing your work more thoroughly. Your intuitive grasp of abstract mathematics is extraordinary." For the next hour, they discussed Amara's approach to the conjecture. Unlike Professor Harrington, Dr. Carter didn't dismiss ideas outright but challenged them thoughtfully, helping Amara refine her thinking. "Mathematics has always been my refuge," Dr. Carter said as their session wound down. "But it hasn't always been welcoming to people who look like us." "How did you overcome that?" Amara asked. Dr. Carter's expression grew reflective. "I had a mentor who saw beyond prejudice to recognize genuine mathematical talent. She fought for me when others wouldn't." She fixed Amara with an intent gaze. "Talent like yours shouldn't be stifled by narrow minds or academic politics." As Amara gathered her things to leave, Dr. Carter made an offer. "I'd like to work with you on developing your approach to the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture. Meet me twice a week before your regular sessions." Amara could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You'd do that for me?" "No, Amara," Dr. Carter corrected gently. "I'd do that for mathematics. Brilliance deserves nurturing, regardless of its source." That evening, Amara shared the news with her father, who swept her into a celebratory hug. "See? The right people notice, just like I said." Ms. Williams visited that weekend, bringing cupcakes to celebrate when Amara told her about Dr. Carter's mentorship. "I knew you just needed the right champion at Harvard," she said, eyes glistening with pride. For the first time since the program began, Amara felt a sense of belonging, not because she had been accepted by everyone, but because someone who truly understood mathematics had validated her potential. Under Dr. Carter's guidance, Amara's approach to the impossible problem began to evolve from intuitive leaps to rigorous mathematical framework. The path to a solution, once merely a distant hope, was beginning to emerge like a constellation becoming visible in the night sky. The rhythm of Amara's life shifted dramatically over the next 2 weeks. On Mondays and Thursdays, she arrived at Harvard 2 hours early to work with Dr. Carter before the regular sessions. On weekends, they met at the public library, where Dr. Carter brought reference materials and guided Amara through the complex mathematical terrain she was navigating. "The key insight in your approach," Dr. Carter explained during one of their sessions, "is reconceptualizing how quantum states interact with prime number distributions. It's not just creative, it's potentially revolutionary." Under Dr. Carter's mentorship, Amara's initial intuitive leaps transformed into a coherent mathematical framework. The Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture, which had seemed an insurmountable peak, was gradually revealing its secrets. "We're establishing a new pathway," Dr. Carter said, eyes bright with excitement as they worked through a particularly challenging section. "This isn't just about solving the conjecture, it's about expanding how we think about mathematics itself." Professor Harrington remained dismissive during the regular sessions, but Amara no longer sought his approval. She participated when required but saved her true mathematical fire for her work with Dr. Carter. Samuel continued to collaborate with her, increasingly convinced of the validity of her approach. "You might actually solve this thing," he told her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief as they reviewed her latest progress. Victoria's hostility, meanwhile, had evolved from mockery to cold silence. She had noticed Amara's meetings with Dr. Carter and clearly resented the attention being given to someone she considered unworthy. One evening, as Amara and her father ate dinner at their small kitchen table, Marcus remarked on the change in his daughter. "You seem different, baby girl. More confident." Amara nodded, considering his observation. "I used to think I needed Professor Harrington to validate my ideas. But Dr. Carter helped me understand that real mathematics doesn't need anyone's permission to be true." "That's a lesson that goes beyond numbers," Marcus said with a proud smile. The following Monday, Amara arrived at Dr. Carter's office to find an unexpected visitor. Ms. Williams had taken the day off work to see Amara in her Harvard environment. "I hope you don't mind," Ms. Williams said, embracing Amara. "Dr. Carter invited me to see what you've been working on." The three of them spent the morning reviewing Amara's approach to the conjecture. Ms. Williams didn't understand all the advanced mathematics, but her pride in her former student was evident. "I knew from the moment you corrected my calculus example in 7th grade that you were extraordinary," Ms. Williams said, her voice thick with emotion. "But watching you tackle a problem that has stumped the world's greatest mathematicians, this is beyond what even I imagined for you." As the program's final presentation day approached, Dr. Carter worked with Amara to prepare her findings. They weren't just polishing a presentation, they were preparing to challenge the mathematical establishment. "Are you ready for the resistance you'll face?" Dr. Carter asked during their penultimate session. Not everyone will be willing to consider such an unorthodox solution, especially coming from a 12-year-old black girl from Dorchester. Amara finished with a small smile. Precisely. Dr. Carter's expression was serious. The history of science and mathematics is filled with revolutionary ideas that were initially rejected because they came from unexpected sources. "The mathematics speaks for itself," Amara said with quiet confidence. "That's what you taught me." Dr. Carter nodded, satisfied. "Show me one more time how you've resolved the quantum aspect of the conjecture." Amara took a deep breath and began working through her solution step by step. Her approach involved reframing the entire problem, viewing the relationship between primes and quantum states not as a convergent series but as interrelated manifolds with specific topological properties. As she concluded her explanation, Dr. Carter sat back with an expression of profound satisfaction. "It's beautiful, Amara. Truly beautiful mathematics. Do you really think it will withstand scrutiny?" Amara asked, voicing the doubt that still occasionally surfaced. "Mathematics isn't a popularity contest," Dr. Carter replied. "It's a search for truth. And what you found here has the ring of truth to it." The night before the final presentation, Amara couldn't sleep. She paced her bedroom, reviewing her solution in her mind, anticipating objections, rehearsing responses. The knowledge that her father, Ms. Williams, and Dr. Carter would all be there tomorrow both comforted and intensified her anxiety. Around midnight, Marcus knocked gently on her door. "You should rest, baby girl. Big day tomorrow." "What if I'm wrong, Daddy?" Amara asked, the question bursting from her like a dam breaking. "What if my solution is flawed and everyone sees it?" Marcus entered the room and sat beside her on the bed. "Then you'll have tried something brave and learned from it. But what if you're right, Amara? What if you've solved what they call impossible?" She leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his unwavering belief in her. "I think I have," she whispered. "The math makes sense. It's elegant and it works. Then tomorrow, you'll show them who Amara Johnson really is." He kissed the top of her head. "Your mother would be so proud of you. Not just for the mathematics, but for your courage." As dawn broke over Boston, Amara finally drifted to sleep, her dreams filled with equations and possibilities. In a few hours, she would challenge a Harvard professor's declaration of impossibility with nothing but her mind and her mathematics. The impossible problem had become her possibility. The morning of the final presentation dawned bright and clear. Amara stood before her mirror in the new dress Marcus had somehow managed to afford for the occasion, simple but elegant, navy blue with a white collar. Ms. Williams had helped style her hair into neat twists adorned with mathematical symbol-shaped clips, a gift from Dr. Carter. "Ready, baby girl?" Marcus called from the living room, dressed in his best suit, reserved for special occasions and church. "As ready as I'll ever be," Amara replied, carefully packing her presentation materials into her backpack. The drive to Harvard was mostly silent, the weight of anticipation filling the car. As they approached the campus, Amara noticed the venue had changed. A sign directed program participants to Thompson Hall, a much larger auditorium than their usual classroom. "They've invited mathematics faculty and graduate students to observe the final presentations," Amara explained, her stomach tightening with nerves. Dr. Carter said it's tradition for this program. Inside Thompson Hall, the difference was stark. Instead of 20 students and their parents, nearly 200 people filled the auditorium. In the front row sat the program participants, with Victoria and Connor chatting animatedly, clearly comfortable in the spotlight. Samuel nodded reassuringly when he spotted Amara. Dr. Carter intercepted them near the entrance. "Good morning, Amara. Mr. Johnson." She smiled warmly at Marcus. "You've raised a remarkable mathematician." "I just gave her room to grow," Marcus replied with pride. "She did the rest herself." Dr. Carter turned to Amara. Are you prepared for today? Amara nodded, clutching her notes. I'm nervous, but I believe in my solution. As do I, Dr. Carter said quietly. Remember, no matter what happens today, you've accomplished something extraordinary. Now, take your seat with the other students. The presentations will begin soon. Amara found her place next to Samuel, who whispered, half the mathematics department is here. I heard even the dean came. Professor Harrington strode to the podium, commanding immediate silence. Welcome to the culminating session of our Young Mathematicians Exceptional Talent Program. Today, our students will present their work on various mathematical challenges they've explored over the past 6 weeks. His gaze swept over the students before continuing. As many of you know, I introduced these young minds to the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture, not with the expectation that they would solve it, of course. A ripple of appreciative laughter spread through the audience. Rather, to inspire them with the beauty of mathematical impossibility. The journey of mathematics is often more illuminating than the destination. The presentations began with Victoria and Connor showcasing their work on a simplified version of a topology problem. Professor Harrington lavished praise on their sophisticated approach and rigorous methodology. One by one, the students presented their projects. Some had tackled complex but established problems, while others had explored creative applications of known principles. Professor Harrington's responses varied from enthusiastic approval to tepid acknowledgement, clearly favoring certain approaches and students. As the morning progressed, Amara's anxiety mounted. Her presentation on the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture wasn't on the official schedule. Professor Harrington had dismissed her request to present her solution weeks ago. But Dr. Carter had assured her there would be an opportunity. After Samuel concluded his presentation on prime number theory, Professor Harrington returned to the podium. This concludes our scheduled presentations. Before we adjourn for refreshments, I'd like to offer some final thoughts on the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture that has served as our inspirational challenge. He began an elaborate explanation of why the conjecture remained unsolved, emphasizing its fundamental resistance to conventional approaches and the mathematical impossibility that made it so fascinating. Even after 40 years of the world's finest mathematical minds attacking this problem, he declared with authority, we remain humbled by its elegant intractability. This is the beauty of pure mathematics. Some truths remain tantalizingly beyond our grasp, reminding us of the limits of human understanding. In the audience, Marcus caught Amara's eye and gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Ms. Williams, seated beside him, did the same. Dr. Carter, standing at the side of the auditorium, watched intently. Amara took a deep breath and raised her hand. Professor Harrington, in the midst of his concluding remarks, didn't notice at first. When several audience members began glancing in Amara's direction, he paused. Yes, Miss Johnson. Is there a question? Amara stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Not a question, Professor. I'd like to present my solution to the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture. A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Professor Harrington's expression hardened. Miss Johnson, as I've explained previously, your approach lacks the mathematical foundation necessary for a serious attempt at this problem. We don't have time for. I believe we should make time, Dr. Carter's voice carried clearly from the side of the room. Academic inquiry demands we consider all serious mathematical approaches, particularly when they challenge our assumptions. The tension in the room was palpable. Professor Harrington and Dr. Carter locked eyes in a silent battle of wills. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Very well. 5 minutes, Miss Johnson. Amara gathered her notes and walked to the podium, aware of every eye upon her, the skepticism from Professor Harrington, the disdain from Victoria, the curiosity from the mathematicians in the audience, and the unwavering support from her father, Ms. Williams, and Dr. Carter. She took a final deep breath and began. The Hamilton-Watanabe conjecture has resisted conventional solutions because we've been viewing it through a limited mathematical lens. By reconceptualizing the relationship between prime distributions and quantum states as interrelated manifolds rather than convergent series. Her initial nervousness melted away as she immersed herself in the beautiful mathematics she had discovered. Equations flowed through her with a clarity that transcended her 12 years, connecting concepts in ways that even she hadn't fully articulated until this moment. Professor Harrington's expression shifted from dismissive to bewildered as Amara progressed through her solution. When she reached the crucial pivot point, her novel application of non-standard analysis to the quantum aspects of the conjecture, whispers erupted among the mathematicians in the audience. Therefore, Amara concluded, her voice strong and clear, by establishing this topological framework, we can prove that the Hamilton-Watanabe conjecture holds true under these conditions, resolving the apparent paradox that has confounded conventional approaches. As she finished, silence enveloped the auditorium. Professor Harrington stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, from the back of the room, someone began to applaud. Others joined, the sound swelling until most of the audience was on their feet. In that moment, standing at the podium as applause washed over her, Amara Johnson was no longer just a 12-year-old girl from Dorchester whom everyone had underestimated. She was a mathematician who had solved the impossible problem. Professor Harrington raised his hand, silencing the applause. His face had drained of color, but his voice remained controlled as he approached the podium. What you've presented is unorthodox, Miss Johnson. His eyes narrowed as he scanned her equations projected on the screen behind her. Your reframing of the quantum prime relationship is certainly creative, but creativity alone doesn't constitute mathematical proof. He turned to the audience, particularly addressing the mathematics faculty. While I appreciate Miss Johnson's enthusiasm, the Hamilton-Watanabe conjecture requires rigorous proof that adheres to established mathematical principles. What we've heard is an interesting but fundamentally flawed speculation. Amara stood her ground. Professor, if you examine the topological transformation I've demonstrated, you'll see it satisfies all the conditions of the conjecture. The proof is complete and valid. Professor Harrington's jaw tightened. Perhaps you misunderstand the depth of mathematical rigor required, Miss Johnson. This conjecture has resisted solution by Field's medalists. The notion that a middle school student could resolve it through such unconventional methods is, frankly, implausible. From the audience, a voice called out, "Let her defend the proof." It was a silver-haired woman Amara didn't recognize, but whose presence seemed to command respect from the other mathematicians. Professor Harrington hesitated, then gestured curtly. Very well. Dr. Abernathy, would you care to pose the first challenge? The silver-haired woman stood. Miss Johnson, your transformation of the quantum state representations is particularly novel. Could you elaborate on how this maintains invariance under the prime distribution function? Amara nodded, grateful for the substantive question. She began explaining the mathematical reasoning behind her approach, drawing additional diagrams on the whiteboard as she spoke. The nervous 12-year-old disappeared entirely, replaced by a focused mathematician defending her work. Other faculty members joined the discussion, posing increasingly technical questions that Amara answered with clarity and precision. Some were clearly skeptical, while others appeared genuinely intrigued by her approach. Dr. Carter observed silently, allowing Amara to stand on her own mathematical merit, though her proud smile was unmistakable. In the audience, Marcus watched in awe as his daughter held her own among some of the world's leading mathematical minds. Professor Harrington interrupted after a particularly detailed exchange about hypercomplex number applications. This speculation is mathematically interesting but fails to address the fundamental paradox identified by Watanabe himself. The quantum prime relationship cannot. Actually, Amara said with quiet confidence, that's precisely what my solution resolves. She turned to the whiteboard and wrote a series of equations. By redefining the space in which we consider these interactions, the paradox disappears. It's not that the relationship can't exist, it's that we've been looking for it in the wrong mathematical dimension. Another mathematician stood up, a younger man with an intense expression. She's right. I've been working on this problem for my dissertation, and her formulation resolves the dimensional conflict that's been the primary obstacle. He stared at Amara with undisguised amazement. It's elegant. Beautifully elegant. More voices joined in, mathematicians turning to each other in excited discussion. Professor Harrington's face flushed as he realized he was losing control of the room. Victoria watched in shocked disbelief as Amara, the girl she had dismissed and mocked, commanded the attention of Harvard's mathematical elite. Dr. Abernathy rose again. "I believe what we're witnessing is a genuine breakthrough. Miss Johnson's approach requires further verification, certainly, but the core insight appears sound. It resolves the dimensional conflict in a way that's both mathematically valid and surprisingly elegant." Professor Harrington made one final attempt to reassert his authority. "This is precisely the problem with encouraging premature speculation. We're dealing with one of the most complex mathematical conjectures of our time. The idea that a complete solution could come from someone you didn't expect." Dr. Carter finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. "History tells us that transformative insights often come from unexpected sources, Richard. The question isn't who solved it, but whether the solution is valid. And from what I'm hearing in this room, many of your colleagues believe it may well be." The dean of the mathematics department, who had been observing silently, stood up. "I suggest we convene a proper review committee to examine Miss Johnson's proof in detail. If it holds up to scrutiny, this would represent a significant contribution to mathematics." He looked directly at Amara. "Regardless of the outcome, young lady, you've impressed some very difficult people to impress today." As the formal proceedings concluded, the auditorium buzzed with excitement. Mathematicians clustered around a whiteboard where Amara's equations remained, debating specific aspects of her approach. Graduate students furiously took notes. Several faculty members approached Amara directly, asking questions and offering business cards. Marcus made his way to his daughter, enveloping her in a tight hug. "I knew you could do it, baby girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You showed them exactly who Amara Johnson is." Ms. Williams joined them, tears streaming unashamedly down her face. "This is just the beginning for you, Amara. Just the beginning." Samuel approached hesitantly. "That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "You actually did it. You solved the impossible problem." Dr. Carter placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. "How does it feel?" Amara looked around at the commotion she had created, mathematicians excitedly discussing her ideas, Professor Harrington standing rigidly to the side as his declaration of impossibility crumbled, Victoria watching from a distance with an unreadable expression. "It feels like truth," Amara replied simply. "Like finding something that was always there, waiting to be discovered." As they prepared to leave, Professor Harrington approached their small group. His face was composed, though tension radiated from him. "Miss Johnson," he said stiffly, "your presentation was unexpected. While I maintain reservations about certain aspects of your approach, I acknowledge the creativity of your thinking." It wasn't an apology or even a full acknowledgement, but from Professor Harrington, it was significant. Amara nodded politely. "Thank you for the opportunity to present my solution, Professor." As he walked away, Marcus whispered, "That's my girl. Taking the high road." Outside Thompson Hall, bathed in the afternoon sunlight, Amara stood surrounded by the people who had believed in her, her father who had sacrificed so much, Ms. Williams who had recognized her gift, Dr. Carter who had mentored her, and Samuel who had become an unexpected ally. A reporter from the university newspaper approached, asking for an interview with the girl who solved the impossible problem. Amara Johnson, 12 years old, from Dorchester, stepped forward to tell her story. The days following Amara's presentation unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. The mathematics community, initially skeptical, was abuzz with discussions of her solution. The review committee established by the dean worked quickly to verify her approach, bringing in specialists in quantum mathematics and number theory to examine every aspect of her proof. Dr. Carter called 3 days after the presentation with the news Amara had been waiting for. "It's official," she said, her voice vibrant with excitement. "The committee has validated your solution. The Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture is no longer unsolved." Amara sat on her bed, surrounded by the papers that had covered her walls for weeks, trying to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. "So it's really true," she whispered. "It works." "More than works," Dr. Carter replied. "The committee called it revolutionary, and paradigm-shifting. You've done something extraordinary, Amara. The story spread beyond Harvard's mathematics department. Local news outlets picked up the story first. Middle school girl solves impossible Harvard math problem. Then national publications followed. Reporters called their apartment so frequently that Marcus had to change their number. Ms. Williams arrived one evening with a stack of newspapers and magazines. "You're famous in the mathematics world now," she said, spreading them across the kitchen table. And beyond. The headlines varied: 12-year-old prodigy challenges mathematical establishment, Boston public school student cracks decades-old problem, young genius proves Harvard professor wrong. Each article emphasized different aspects of Amara's achievement, but all conveyed the same essential message: the impossible had been accomplished by the most unexpected person. What touched Amara most deeply was a small article in the Roosevelt Middle School newsletter, written by students in the journalism club. "Our classmate Amara Johnson has made history," it read. "She's shown that brilliance can come from anywhere, including our school hallways." A week after the presentation, Harvard's president requested a meeting with Amara and her father. In an oak-paneled office with centuries of tradition embedded in its walls, he offered what would change the course of her life. "Miss Johnson, Harvard University would like to establish a special educational program for you," he explained. "Not quite undergraduate studies, you're still young for that, but a tailored curriculum under the guidance of our mathematics faculty, including Dr. Carter." Marcus leaned forward. What exactly would this mean for Amara's day-to-day life? She would divide her time between advanced studies here and age-appropriate education at her current school. "We'd provide transportation, materials, and a stipend to ensure this opportunity doesn't create financial hardship for your family." As they discussed details, Amara noticed a document on the president's desk, a letter from Professor Harrington, partially visible. She couldn't read most of it, but the phrase "reconsider my position" caught her eye. Later, Dr. Carter explained. "Professor Harrington has requested to step down as director of the Young Mathematicians program," she said with a hint of satisfaction. "He's acknowledged, privately, at least, that his assessment methods may have been limited." "Is he in trouble?" Amara asked, surprised to find herself concerned about the professor who had dismissed her so thoroughly. "Not trouble, exactly. Let's say he's experiencing an overdue reevaluation of his assumptions." Dr. Carter smiled. "He's a brilliant mathematician, but brilliance without humility can be a dangerous combination." Victoria's response to Amara's success came unexpectedly. Amara was working in Dr. Carter's office when Victoria appeared in the doorway, her usual confidence noticeably diminished. "My father says your solution is legitimate," she said without preamble. "He's on the board here, and the mathematics department briefed them." Amara nodded, unsure how to respond. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to say. I was wrong about you. I made assumptions that were unfair and—" She struggled visibly, prejudiced. It wasn't a complete apology, but Amara recognized the effort it took. "Mathematics doesn't care about our assumptions," she replied, echoing what she had told Michael weeks earlier. "It only cares about truth." Victoria nodded stiffly and left without another word, but something had shifted, a small acknowledgement of error that represented its own kind of solution. Perhaps the most meaningful reaction came from Samuel, who approached Amara during one of her visits to Dr. Carter's office. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly, "watching you stand up there and defend your work changed something for me. I've always played it safe, mathematically speaking." "And now?" Amara asked. "Now I'm exploring my own unconventional approaches." His eyes lit up with new determination. "You showed me that the established paths aren't the only valid ones." 3 weeks after her presentation, Amara received an invitation that left her breathless. The International Congress of Mathematicians wanted her to present her solution at their next conference in Paris. Marcus found her staring at the invitation, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong, baby girl?" "Mom would have loved Paris," Amara whispered. "She always wanted to travel." Marcus wrapped his arms around her. "She's seeing it through your eyes now, Amara. And she couldn't be prouder. As summer faded into autumn, Amara settled into her new routine, mornings at Roosevelt Middle School, afternoons at Harvard, working with Dr. Carter and other mathematicians interested in extending her breakthrough to other unsolved problems. The Harvard Mathematics Department established the Johnson Scholarship for underrepresented students showing exceptional mathematical promise, a direct result of Amara's impact on the institution's thinking about where mathematical talent might be found. Professor Harrington, to everyone's surprise, requested to meet with Amara again. In a brief but significant conversation, he acknowledged what must have been difficult for him. "Your approach to the conjecture revealed my own intellectual blind spots, Miss Johnson. That's a valuable lesson for any mathematician." As Amara left his office, she reflected that solutions came in many forms, some mathematical, others deeply human. 1 year later, Amara stood at the podium in a packed auditorium at the Boston Science Center. Now 13, she had grown an inch taller, and her confidence had blossomed along with her deepening mathematical abilities. The audience before her represented a transformation in her world, mathematicians who now treated her as a colleague, educators rethinking their assumptions about giftedness, and most importantly, rows of young students from Boston public schools invited specifically for this event. The Hamilton-Watanabe solution was just a beginning, Amara explained, her voice clear and strong. It opened doors to new questions about how we conceptualize mathematical spaces and relationships. In the front row sat Marcus, beaming with pride, alongside Ms. Williams. Dr. Carter watched from the side of the stage, her mentorship having evolved into a collaborative research relationship that had already yielded 2 published papers. Most surprisingly, Professor Harrington sat among the audience, noticeably changed from the arrogant figure who had once declared the problem impossible. His humbling experience had prompted what his colleagues described as an overdue transformation in his teaching approach. He now led a university initiative to identify mathematical talent in underserved schools. After her presentation, Amara participated in a panel discussion about diversifying pathways into mathematical careers. When asked about her journey, she spoke candidly. "The greatest barrier wasn't the mathematics itself," she said. "It was convincing others that I deserved to be in the room at all." A reception followed, where Amara was approached by a shy 10-year-old girl from her former elementary school. "I want to be a mathematician too," the girl confided, eyes wide with admiration. "But my teacher says I ask too many questions." Amara smiled. "The best mathematicians are the ones who never stop questioning. Here's my email. Send me your questions anytime." Later, as the event wound down, a reporter asked Amara about her plans for the future. "I'm developing a new approach to the Riemann hypothesis," she replied, referencing another famous unsolved problem. When the reporter looked surprised, Amara laughed. "Why not? Impossible is just a word people use when they've stopped looking for solutions." That evening, Harvard's president announced the creation of the Pathways to Mathematics program, inspired by Amara's journey and designed to identify and nurture mathematical talent in communities traditionally underrepresented in the field. The pilot program would begin in Dorchester schools, with plans to expand across Boston and eventually nationwide. Amara had been closely involved in designing the program, insisting that it not simply identify students who excelled within traditional frameworks, but rather look for the unique, creative approaches that might indicate mathematical thinking outside conventional patterns. As Amara and Marcus walked home that night, taking the longer route through their neighborhood rather than accepting the offered Harvard car service, they passed Roosevelt Middle School where her journey had begun. "Did you ever imagine all this?" Marcus asked, gesturing vaguely toward the world that had opened up for his daughter. "When you were working on your bedroom walls, did you know what would happen?" Amara considered the question seriously. "I didn't solve the problem to become famous or change Harvard," she said finally. "I solved it because it was there, waiting for someone to see it differently." She smiled up at her father. "But I'm glad it opened doors for others too." Marcus nodded, understanding. "Your mother used to say that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity isn't. So we create new opportunities," Amara replied. They continued walking in comfortable silence until Amara spoke again. "You know what's funny, Daddy? A year ago, Professor Harrington called the Hamilton-Watanabe Conjecture impossible. Now students are learning my solution in graduate-level courses. The impossible just needed someone who didn't know it was supposed to be impossible, Marcus said with a chuckle. As they reached their apartment building, the same modest place they'd always lived, though Harvard had offered housing near campus, Amara paused to look up at the stars. The most beautiful thing about mathematics, she said thoughtfully, is that it doesn't care who discovers its truths. The patterns are there, waiting for anyone brave enough to see them differently. Inside their apartment, pinned to Amara's bedroom wall where her equations had once covered every inch, hung a framed note from Dr. Carter, to Amara, who reminds us that impossible is just a starting point. Beneath it, in Amara's neat handwriting, she had added her own words: "The best solutions come when we question not just the problem, but the assumptions about who can solve it." The impossible problem had been solved. And in its solution, other impossibilities had begun to fall away too. Dear friend, talent exists in every community, but opportunity doesn't. Amara's story reminds us that brilliance can emerge from unexpected places when given the chance to shine. By supporting and amplifying diverse voices in education, science, and beyond, we create a world where no potential is wasted because of prejudice or assumption. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful narratives that challenge stereotypes and inspire change. Together, we can create a future where everyone's gifts are recognized, regardless of where they come from.